All right, it is 8 o'clock. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. We'll call the meeting to order. We have the April 26th minutes in our packet, so we haven't met for quite a while. Has everyone had a chance to review those? If so, can I have a motion for approval?
I so move.
We have a motion by Prakash. Is there a second?
Peterson, second.
Second. Well, we had Preston. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, thank you. Motion carries. On the phone, we have Steve Swantek and Dean Brashani. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. You're missing nice weather here if you're out of state. Second on the agenda, we have the Renaissance Zone Development Plan update. There were some legislative changes, and we'll go through those. Thank you.
Good morning, Megan Elshaug with the Planning Department. This is an item earlier this year. We had brought forward the legislative changes, which were a handful of items that if you have questions on or want to touch base on, I'd be glad to talk through all of those. But this specifically is an update to the Renaissance Zone Development Plan to allow for an 8-year benefit. It is something that we're required to do to be able to take advantage or have others be able to take advantage of that benefit, making that update to the development plan. It would allow benefits for projects of new construction, residential purchase, commercial lease, and rehab. With that legislative change, however, an 8-year abatement for a rehab project would require, instead of a 50% full and true value investment, it would be a minimum of a 75%. So I just wanted to note that change. On your screen are the proposed changes in red to the plan. In your packet just shows the full context of that section if you want to kind of read that in full. But red are what we are proposing for changes. We do retain the option for a 5-year benefit for a rehab project that is between a 50 to 74% investment of that current and true value. We do have to bring this to the Cass County and to the Fargo Public School District, and so we have a plan for that moving forward prior to then bringing it to the City Commission and then ultimately the state, should things go favorably. And up on your screen is the suggested motion. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Dean and Steve, did you have any questions of Megan?
Madam Chair?
No,
okay,
I
go
don't.
ahead. Okay. Commissioner.
Megan, this is Dean. Just at the risk of suggesting anarchy, so it doesn't consider this more morbid curiosity than an agenda I'm going down. Is there any option for there being 2 approaches so that a developer can utilize the mechanism that fits their pro forma the best?
I'm not sure if I understand your full question, but are you indicating a different tax year benefit besides the 8-year if it works out better?
Well, the longer time frame requires a more substantial initial contribution than the shorter time frame. And is there an option for having 2 different time frame and buy-in options, so to speak?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for that question. So the 75%, that increase is for a rehab only project. And so not sure if you can see the screen or not, but we do keep or propose to keep the option for a 5-year if the benefit is, if the investment is only 50% to 74% of the current and true value. And so we feel that it's important to allow that for smaller projects. So does that answer your question?
It sure does. Thank you very much.
Okay. And we have a question from Arlette.
Yeah, I don't know if you or anyone else can answer this, but can you give us a sense of the legislative intent behind this? Why this came up?
That's a great question. I don't know if I know exactly why. I do know that last year, in preparation for the legislative session, there were a number of sessions that the contacts with the state had done with all of the jurisdictions and folks who administer the program, who commented on maybe issues or things they've heard in their communities. And so they kind of took all of those comments and kind of brought forward the changes that ultimately you see. And for the most part, from what I understand, the changes that were approved with this last legislative session were kind of all of the initial changes. Like, I don't think there was a lot of change from what was initially brought. I don't know if Nicole knows at all. Nope, we're not entirely sure. But.
And then just remind us, it is the property tax portion of the local that we are providing for, right?
Yes, yep, property tax, and then at the state, it's income tax.
And no property tax on the state level?
Correct. It's all, the property tax is all administered locally here.
Locally.
And then income tax is at the state level. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Any other questions, Chad?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Historically, I think, just not want to speak on behalf of the county commission, but myself only as a perspective, 5 years has really been that sweet spot. When we get to that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, 20 years, I've often found that the math doesn't make a whole lot of sense for our neighbors. As we all know, this is subsidizing our friends that are investing locally, and the rest of us don't necessarily have that opportunity to reap the benefits of a tax credit for our property taxes. So while the spirit of this I'm absolutely for, and I've always been very supportive of the Renaissance Zone in the 5-year number, the 8-year, again, legislatively, I'm curious as to why it happened too, but and I was out there pretty active. It just sort of caught me off guard. I am absolutely not supportive of an arbitrary 8-year vote because, again, I don't want to pay property taxes either. And I wish none of us had to, but the reality is that's what we do as a society to make sure we can keep our roads open in the winter, garbage picked up, and all the other things that need to go along with existence as a society. So I'm not real keen on the 8 years because, again, it's something I don't want to pay either, but I do, and it's okay. And frankly, my property taxes are not out of control. My property taxes are not high. I think maybe my school taxes are a little bit high, but that's a topic for a different board and a different discussion. But broadly speaking, city, county, parks, I think we've all done an amazing job of controlling taxes, especially given the environment we've been in lately with inflation, jobs, workforce struggles. I think we've all done, and this is inclusive of our friends in West Fargo, our friends in Castleton, all the other cities in Cass anyway. I think we've done a really good job controlling expenditures. So I don't think we need the 8 years, so I will not be supporting this, but love the dialogue.
Okay, good.
Madam Chair, so just for clarification, so the Renaissance Zone, it doesn't eliminate paying property taxes. What it does is it freezes you at that level, and then for 5 years or 8 years, then you get that you are frozen at that level, then it goes to the new level. That's basically, so this doesn't affect anybody. The property tax owners aren't paying more to make up for this or anything like that. And it's been a phenomenal success. I mean, we're so fortunate, obviously, lots of people long before us were. I mean, if you look at downtown Fargo, the Renaissance Zone, if you looked at the amount of taxable increase in property, it's astronomical. And so it's been a phenomenal thing. But I just wanted to clarify that it's not like you don't have to pay property taxes for 5 years or 8 years. You're just frozen at the current level. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, Deb,
Thanks
could
for
I
the clarification.
could I clarify one thing, Deb?
Yes, go ahead, Jim.
I think the request for the 8 years came through the Department of Commerce, I think primarily from Bismarck,
I think so.
because they viewed there were some projects that were more difficult to do that, you'd had the 5-year in place for 20 years and people were able to get some projects and some needed just a little bit more assistance. Also, just to clarify on the property tax exemption, actually it does reduce on an existing building. You still pay on the land, but you do not pay on any of the improvements. And so there is a dip down from what it was before for an existing building.
Okay, temporary decrease. Go
Madam Chair.
ahead, Arlette.
If I could just say something. The reason for my question is that I do think this needs to be used discriminatorily and that it's not an automatic. We would need to do some pretty in-depth analysis to make sure that that we're not overusing something here. I do question, and Commissioner Pepcorn's argument for it is actually the reason that I'm contemplating at what point do we say we have completed or accomplished what we set out to accomplish. And, that's probably for a future conversation, but that evaluation of what we're doing, is it accomplishing what we set out to do? And I do believe it has. So whether we would really need to jump up to this next level, and I'm always conscious of providing exemptions, and I think we need to do this very carefully.
A question then, Megan, Jim, and crew, have we had local requests for these changes as well as the Commerce Department bringing it forward?
Yeah,
We-
I think,
Oh, go ahead.
excuse me, since the, sorry to interrupt, Megan. I know in a couple of cases where people are looking at some redevelopment, they've been talking to me about a TIF, and they've said, we could get 8-year Renaissance zone, that might be enough instead of a TIF that may have to go 10 years. And so, there is some interest in, again, the more difficult to do projects, Megan.
Yeah, I was just only going to add that so our next application is for an 8-year. And so we hadn't had any inquiries until now, but we are hearing some rumblings of some more down the road, so.
Okay, go ahead, Arlette. Follow up?
Can you indicate what projects actually didn't happen or what is on the table right now?
Well, up next on your agenda is an application for a rehab project. I'm not aware of any projects that haven't happened because of it. We hadn't received any inquiry until very recently about the 8-year. And so because we hadn't received any inquiry, we were kind of waiting to see, as you know, we will be doing the Renaissance, the whole plan next year. And so one of our thoughts was, well, should we maybe start that early? And so now that we do have an application here at the table, is also one of the reasons why we're bringing it forward to you. But we are hearing of other properties that might be coming in maybe in the next 6 months who are hoping to take advantage of that 8-year as well.
So if I can follow up.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair. So I know we do a third-party review for other incentives. Do we have any kind of outside analysis or evaluation?
Currently, we do not, and I'm not aware that we have ever done that for Renaissance Zone. The benefit of Renaissance Zone plans too is that they're really tailored to your local community. No, that doesn't, change. That's a different topic than what you're saying, Commissioner. But we have not, to my knowledge, ever done that, and we don't currently do that.
So I'm assuming these requests coming forward are probably related to the fact that the legislation was passed, perhaps.
Correct.
Yeah.
Nicole had something, then we'll go to Prakash.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Megan said that very eloquently. Originally, we were planning on taking those legislative changes and doing the plan update, which was scheduled for next year anyway, which is a very public process that has public engagement as part of that step. And thanks to application requests and wanting to be competitive, across the metro area for the downtown specific, we saw the ability to do kind of a minor edit to keep up with the current legislation requests. And to answer Commissioner Preston's previous comment, the Department of Commerce really led a lot of these changes, requests to the legislation based on citywide input from all the jurisdictions that are administrating Renaissance Zone throughout the state. And so this was kind of a compilation of all of those kind of administrative aspects.
Okay, and Prakash?
Madam Chair, mine is a procedural question. What happened? This is very helpful for me to know the pros and cons. What if we don't approve this? In the procedurally, it will not move forward, or is this just a formality that we are
As far
approving?
as I see, it's a state change, but we are not required to adopt it.
Okay.
That is correct. There's no requirement to adopt it, and should this not be adopted, the development plan that exists today will just continue
Yep.
until we come back to it next year.
Since it changed statewide, we do have the latitude to go with this, but it is not required. Dave?
Just real quick, Madam Chair, if we don't adopt it, then all of our competitors will adopt it, and we will not have as many projects. I'm concerned we already won't have as many projects because of the current building cost environment and also interest rates. And so we're already, if you notice, we're not having as many requests because of the current situation. And also because of the downtown, we have lots of public safety issues that we're not addressing. And so we're seeing a reversal of what we've been working for so long. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Any other points of discussion? Chad?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question to, I guess, leadership and then city commissioners. You can overrule this board, right? So all this is a recommendation to the city commission. The city commission can do whatever you want, as can really anyone for that matter.
Okay. All right. There is no other discussion. Do we have a motion to move forward or to not adopt this?
Madam Chair, I'll make the motion.
We have a motion for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Happy to second it.
We have Reed. Thank you, though. And any other discussion on this? If none, roll call vote, please.
Pipcorn,
Aye.
Madell,
Aye.
Matthew,
Aye.
Swiatek,
Yes.
Peterson,
No.
Preston,
Aye.
Brashani,
Aye.
Matter.
Yes. Motion carries. All right, thank you, everyone. That was good discussion. I think we all understand the procedure a little better. We have a rehab application from Block 8 LLC located at 814 Main Avenue. Megan, would you walk us through that?
Thank you. So we have an application for an 8-year benefit here. It is, as Chairperson noted, 814 Main Avenue. The intent of the project is to rehabilitate an 8,300 square foot single-story building from restaurant to commercial. This is where the Mexican Village was up until recently. The investment is $875,000, which exceeds the minimum investment thresholds for rehab. Currently is $40 per square foot, and with an 8-year exemption would need to meet 75% of the true and full value, which this is 85% of. It is consistent with the Renaissance Zone Development Plan to provide commercial development within the target area. This is Block 20, which is identified as appropriate for preservation with opportunities for increased housing on upper floors. We do believe this will be a benefit to the downtown fabric. There are 2 lease spaces. Sorry, I'll jump to some images. This is what it currently looks like, and this is what it will look like. So there'll be some facade improvements, more windows, as you can see. And this is the floor plan, and so there will be 2 tenant spaces in here on the top. So north is to the left, and so this is as if you are facing east, kind of looking at that floor plan. So there's two lease spaces here. This did receive an 82 on the score out of 100, and staff is recommending approval. And there you'll see up on your screen with the contingency of those changes that your board just recommended for approval. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. The applicant, Kevin Bartram, is here also to talk about his project if you have any questions.
And did you have any comments that you would like? Okay, he's here just to answer, he tells us. So, any questions on this rehabilitation application? If none, we have a motion before us for approval or denial of the project. Do I hear any motions?
So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
question, and maybe this is for our team members. If we approve an 8-year exemption and the city commission, county commissions, school boards have not approved in tangent, or in parallel maybe is a better way to say this, logistically, is that an issue for you? What happens if you have to go backwards? Or can you even go backwards?
So I think what we would do is if there isn't support for the 8-year, and this is where I've mentioned to the applicant, so what will happen is this application will just hang tight for a while after your board sees it. If and when the development plan is fully approved, then it would be brought forward. If it isn't approved, I think at that time the applicant would probably withdraw and maybe make a different request, or I guess I can't answer that exactly, but it just wouldn't be able to go forward.
I'd say there's
the plan has to be approved.
Presumptively, there's a 1-person no vote on this. that's me. You just sort of had the remainder of the poll, so presumably so. And maybe this is a question for the county legal team, actually, because I'm not entirely sure what view we can have as a county. I'm sort of thinking holistically here. Even if the city of Fargo says yes to the Renaissance Zone, does the county even have a say in our tax anymore? I'm not entirely sure.
So, Madam Chair, this has happened in the past where the city has approved it, and Jim and Nicole, if you want to correct me, but that has happened where the city has approved it and the county has not. Isn't that correct? And so that it's a reduction. Go ahead, Jim.
Megan, I believe maybe you could clarify, this plan amendment won't be approved by the state until the school and the county approve it also.
Oh,
That's
okay.
correct. So there has to be specific support for the 8-year change from the county and the school for this to be effective locally, and the city commission, but for this to be effective.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Gilmore.
So we can move it forward, but nothing really happens until that approval is completed. Okay.
So, Madam Chair, can I just ask one question? So
for it,
obviously, the
Dave.
current value of the building is $1,028,000, and the estimated value was $1,900,000. So for the future meetings, if you don't mind showing what the current property taxes are paid, and then once it's completed, what the projected property taxes are paid, I'd appreciate that. If you could do that for the meetings down the road, just for,
Thank you,
one-
Commissioner. I do have
Tax or
that for you.
value?
I'm sorry.
Tax or value, are you talking
No,
about?
the property tax payments, if that's okay, if you don't mind doing that.
Yep.
And then once again, I just want to reiterate, this is a fantastic program, and I can't believe we're debating whether this is worthwhile. Obviously, the costs of construction and interest rates are much higher. The projects are much more expensive. That's the reason that they extended it. And so to even debate whether we want to continue to participate in this is unbelievable to me. If you look across the board, this has had a huge impact in downtown Fargo. There's no debate if you want to look at the property tax values, and to even debate that we want to continue to participate is that's just not good leadership from my perspective. Thank you.
Thank
And
you, Commissioner, and I
You
do-
had the tax value.
I do. So for example, the building only, currently the taxes are, or for overall 20,000 annually for the building would be just above 15,000. Using today's numbers, after an 8-year or whichever exemption, but after that happened, it would be for the building a little over 28,000. So that's a difference of almost $13,000 increase in tax and just the structure after the abatement ends.
So
Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Madam Chair, but one more thing. So then the higher property tax rate, that's forever. It raises that forever. So it's a phenomenal program. It's a phenomenal way to do things. It's been a phenomenal success. And so I think we're just so fortunate. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Chad?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Respectfully, Commissioner Pepcorn, I would say it's the polar opposite of bad leadership. I think it's exemplary leadership in that we're paying attention to a lot of people investing a lot of resources in a lot of locations throughout the entire metro area, be it Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, Cass Clay. And we have a selective zone where a handful of people can directly benefit from this. And now it's having an extension of 3 additional years, meaning the remainder of us that are not getting these exemptions are having to subsidize. And I understand you say there's a baseline of expectations in terms of property tax. However, when you build a giant building, all the services for that building are accelerated. So you have a high rise of, say, 100 units or 50 units or however many units. All of the services for those units are still dependent on taxes for that remaining period of time. So, like I said, for me, it's always been that sweet spot of 5 years because I understand there's absolutely a cost to greenfield development to all of our neighbors. There's also a cost to brownfield, meaning infill development to all of our neighbors. When we start accelerating these things to the point where no one pays taxes except everybody else in anticipation of an accelerated value of some portion over some period of time, the presumption has always been that if we didn't have this, no one would pound a nail in this town. No. And to Commissioner Preston's point, what I would love to have happen is, and I made a recommendation to some of our friends in West Fargo. There was a large project coming before us, and we had an opportunity to comment on it. What I said was I would love to have, much like we did with the new development for the diversion south of Epic's first properties It'd be to the east of that, and I don't know the address there, but I would have loved to have seen the city of Fargo suggest to these developers, what does your project look like with a 5-year exemption, a 10-year exemption, a 15-year exemption, a 20-year exemption, a 25-year exemption? What you're going to find is the 20-year building doesn't look substantively different from a 10-year building. It may have another couple apartments on top, or it may have another floor on top, but it doesn't go from a 1-story building to a 15-story building with a parking ramp. There's just no ROI on that. Either the math works or it doesn't. And when we talk about values of what, $125,000, I have to pick up my number here. 125,000, I can't remember, it was in here, for a period of 8 years. If that $12,000 is the make or break on this site, there's no way this investment's getting done. I'm fine with state income tax credits because that's not within our purview. That's our friends in Bismarck. But all of us as neighbors adding an additional X amount of value on top of this just because we are sad to see the Mexican Village gone, which I am actually, because now I have to drive to 32nd to get my free chips, which is frustrating. Regardless of my struggles in my chip fascination, I contend this project would have happened to some degree with a 5-year relative to 8, but and no disrespect to anyone applying for anything, whether it's a TIF, a pilot, Renaissance Zone application, it's the law. And I was, as most of you know, some of you don't, one of the projects I owned downtown was the very first project, some may say it's a second project, I contend it's the first, in the Renaissance Zone. And I can tell you I did put more money into my building along with my partners than I would have otherwise. But I didn't put another $1 million into it. I put another $50,000 into what was a multi-million-dollar project, because this isn't the make or break on that cash flow. It's not the make or break on whether my building exists or it fails some years in the future. So Commissioner Pepcorn and I disagree, and that's okay, but I contend the fact that it's being dismissed so curtly is, again, the opposite of bad leadership. It's good leadership that we're looking at this hard, and the fact that there is some debate is a wonderful thing, not a bad thing. So thank you.
I appreciate the debate. Steve or Dean, do you have any comments or questions? Okay. Sometimes when you're in the background, it's hard for us to see if you're wanting to speak. Arlette, go ahead.
Mr. Bartram, could you just talk a little bit? As I understand, there's 2 housing units in the project, or am I mistaken? I was surprised. I think on your slide it showed residential units. No, not.
There's no housing in the project.
Okay.
I kind of want to maybe I can sure answer any questions on the project itself, but I maybe want to digress a little bit or go back just a little bit. We've done a lot of development in downtown Fargo, downtown Moorhead, and that's the areas that we focus on. We don't really do much development in other areas of town, partly because we're going to compete with clients of our architecture business that are working in other areas of town. So we tend to focus our projects in the downtown area. We were watching the Renaissance Zone changes at the legislative level very, very closely, and I guess I'm a little surprised the city maybe wasn't watching it as closely as we were, because that was a big deal. 5 years is a really good program, but 5 years is not does not totally stabilize some of these projects. It's very difficult over 5 years. So the 8 years, maybe it's a somewhat arbitrary number, whether it's 7 years, 8 years, it's not 10 years, whatever the case is, that was a big deal for us. And it was signed into law in August. Now we're in the end of the year, and I guess I was surprised when I approached planning that this wasn't already being talked about. So now our project is sitting here essentially in limbo. Our tenant wants to move in by July 1st when their lease expires, and there's a very good chance that they will not be able to do that. And there's a very good chance that we'll lose this tenant if this project doesn't get approved. The Renaissance Zone incentives for this project 100% pass through to the tenant. There's no benefit to us. It just lowers their overall rent and their operating costs, and it is a big deal. It's a huge deal. Right now, we're seeing a lot of projects that are running upwards of $3 to $3.50 a square foot in real estate taxes, property taxes. In the past, it was a big deal when it got over $2 a square foot. So now operating expenses are running $7 and $8 a square foot on many projects. In the past, it was always $5 to $6. Some were even less than $5. So it is a huge deal. This is a small retailer. If this tenant doesn't move in, probably our best alternative is to tear the building down and to redevelop the site, probably as multifamily. We have plans in the drawer to do that, and are very open to doing that, but we're going to be back at this same question at some point because this property is a very expensive property in an infill site to redevelop, and the 8 years is a really, really big deal. We have other projects that are downtown, and I'll name at least a couple of them. One is the land that we're trying to acquire behind the Ford building, to the east of the Ford building. We have all the lots there where Steve's Package Store and the houses are, except for one lot, one home that we haven't been able to acquire yet. That project would be a mixed-use, very substantial project similar to what you've seen in downtown Fargo, probably $25 to $30 million worth of work. If not a Renaissance zone, 5-year Renaissance zone would not be nearly enough for a project like that with the infrastructure costs that are going into it and the cleanup and everything else that goes into that area, and the difficulties when it's near the railroad tracks and all the things that go with it. A TIF would be a possibility, but frankly, TIFs are kind of cumbersome, and they're difficult to work with for us anyway. Maybe other developers not so much. So the 8-year Renaissance zone is a sweet spot. That would be enough. That would be good enough. It's maybe not a 10-year TIF or a 15-year TIF, but it would get the project built. And I think to Commissioner Peterson's comments, more is always better in where I'm coming from, but 8 is enough. 5 is not enough on a project like that. There's just too much into it. To acquire the land. We've been sitting on that land for probably 3 to 4 years, still waiting for that one property. So it's a huge investment to get to the point of working on those projects. Competing cities, I don't know what West Fargo is going to do if they're going to approve the 8 years. I do know Moorhead has a 15-year Renaissance zone. Their program in their downtown area, it's similar to Fargo in that it's confined to a certain area. Their program is 5 years at 100% less. You still pay on the land, but of the improvements, 5 years at 100%, 5 years at 75% exemption, and 5 years at 50%. So for us as a developer, it gets us back into paying the taxes as the city and county and whatever. You gain some tax. By the time year 6 rolls around, you're probably money ahead over what was there beforehand. It's a wonderful program. I think it's a very good program. That's what the competition is right next to Fargo. I think, as you're all aware, Moorhead, their entire downtown area is going to be different in the next 5 to 10 years. How that finally develops is hard to tell. But they're working with a TIF and a 15-year Renaissance zone in the competing city right across the river. So I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but I guess it's a little frustrating as a developer that this program was out there as of August 1st. Now we're at the end of the year. Now our project schedule is being impacted because this hasn't been looked at before, and it's a little bit frustrating. Even waiting till the end of February, so we can't start remodeling until then or the 1st of March to try to get this tenant in there by July 1st is a huge lift. Okay. And if we can't get them in there by July 1st, we may lose them.
Okay. Quick question, then Commissioner Press has one. Is the 75% requirement a hindrance in your estimation?
The
75% for, with the 8 years? No, it was for a rehab, wasn't it 75% instead of 50%?
In Moorhead?
No, and Fargo, the threshold, the investment
threshold.
Oh, yeah. Well, yes. Yeah, I mean, like Commissioner Pepcorn said, the costs are out of sight. I mean, the costs are way higher than they have been. And it wasn't like a 3% or 5% increase. It was a 30 or 35 or 40% increase over the last few years. Huge increases in costs. So, yeah, and now on top of that, interest rates are 7.5%, 8%, not 3 or 4%. So, yeah, these kind of programs are more necessary now than they were 3 or 4 years ago. Hugely necessary on some of these projects, and especially targeting areas that do have these added costs of land acquisition and demolition and cleanup and those sorts of things. And we tend to try to minimize those, but out in South Fargo or Greenfield sites, we do not have those. But down here we have those expenses, and they're huge expenses.
Okay. Commissioner Preston.
Yeah, this isn't so much a question for you, Mr. Bartram, but I fully understand when we're looking at individual projects that it is difficult to see a way out of making a project successful. However, as a body, publicly elected and appointed, I think it's important for us to keep in mind what we are trying to achieve with downtown. And I need to go back to my original comments here in regards to more of a gradated kind of approach to this incentive. This particular project scored only an 82. It does not have residential mixed with commercial. So with the long-term vision of downtown, is this truly what we're aiming for? And if not, should that be considered in the level of exemption that we're recommending? And that's probably more of a rhetorical question than one that the staff can answer, but something I think for us to consider as we go forward. We should not be doing blanket 8-year exemptions probably, nor should we be doing that with TIF and other things.
So if I could answer part of that question anyway, the mixed-use properties, I think, have been sort of in vogue in a way. But if you really drive around downtown Fargo, the mixed-use properties have a lot of vacancy, and office vacancy in general in Fargo, not just downtown, but all over Fargo. There are huge properties that are sitting empty. I'm aware of one office that has 150,000 square feet of vacant space. There's a building I can think of downtown without naming it that has 25,000 square feet of vacancy right on Center Avenue. Some of the mixed use in some of these new buildings, even with incentives, the rents have been, $30 to $40 a square foot, where in other areas in South Fargo and certain areas might be $15 or $20 a square foot. The rents are just not affordable in some of them. Some projects just aren't big enough. This site isn't really big enough, I don't believe, for, and there's arguments both ways. I just don't feel like it's big enough for a mixed-use project, or just to sort of arbitrarily throw in 3,000 or 4,000 square feet of commercial on top of, or below 20 apartments to call it a mixed use doesn't make it a more successful project. In a way, this block is a mixed-use block, or the 2 or 3 block area is a mixed-use block of downtown. There might be an apartment building that's totally apartment right next to a retail or a restaurant or something like that. To me, that does the same thing than a mixed-use building. And I wish we would look at it more as a mixed-use block or mixed-use area of town, more so than right within the building. We've had some arguments with the planning office on this before, and I think we're seeing more and more. Some developers are hoping not to do mixed use. There's, another example, the Kilbourne's project, The Landing, has a restaurant site in the corner that's empty. It's called a mixed use building. It's 95% apartment, but to throw one, and I'm not criticizing that project, I should never name names, but just because that has that mixed use opportunity in there, it's a mixed use building. I'm not so sure that it really fits.
Let me just clarify here a little bit. I'm not talking just about mixed use. I'm talking about building height as well, so that the value, obviously, per square mile is
More density, yep.
More density, exactly. Okay. So, and again, I understand fully that right now we probably have some excess vacancies, but we, as a public body, need to have that long-term view, and that's what I'm struggling with.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Oh, go ahead, Chad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think to our developer's point, it reinforces those of us that are in elected office. We need to pay attention to what we do with our property taxes. I think the county's done a good job. And again, I said I think the city's done a good job too, by the way. Given the fact that a school board is roughly 60 to 65% of our tax burden, I don't know how often local constituents and developers push back on our school boards, probably very rarely because it's politically very volatile, right? It's a little hot potato that no one wants to talk about. But that's where our property tax burden is. And then also to the point, I never said this here, but I've said this to my peer group quite often. We had an area of town that no one wanted to build in, so we incentivized it to make people and encourage people to build in it. Now we have an area of town where, per our developers' comments, no one can afford to build, and then no one can afford to rent because it's done so well. To what degree do we need to incentivize further the acceleration of costs in one area of town? That's my struggle here, not the fact that we shouldn't do something for anyone for that matter, maybe to some degree, but in this area of town, because I think, again, there is a cost to developing in the core, logistically and other things that cost that impact, and, you know, property acquisitions and holding property over time. But 8 years just seems to be that tipping point of, okay, why doesn't anyone have to pay? So I guess that's my point, is that we've incentivized it so well that it worked so well, no one can afford to build here. That to me is, as Commissioner Pepcorn said, is an absolute home run out of the park. Thank you.
If that was my message, that was not my intended message, that we can't afford to build here. I'm just saying there are certain blocks, there are certain areas of town that in order to develop that block, there needs to be some incentives. I mean, the area I'm talking about behind the Ford building, we could right now, if we can't do anything with that block, because if we want to come to the city and ask for a TIF, we have to leave those expenses there, tearing down the homes and cleaning up the site. That has to be, we have to get the TIF approved before we can tear those buildings down. If we knew that there was a Renaissance zone for that area, and that's a Renaissance zone block, 8 years, we would tear those homes down now, knowing that there's a strong likelihood we would get a 8-year Renaissance zone in the future. So it would help the blighted areas around town, and we would end up, you know, sitting on the project until it was affordable, or financing or costs or whatever, until we could put the project together, knowing that the 8-year Renaissance zone was there. So I'm getting off topic of Mexican Village, but the 8 years is a big deal, and 8 years would change the whole approach developers would take in downtown Fargo immensely. I know of at least 2 other sites that I'm working on personally with clients that they're in the same dilemma. They can't clean up their block. One of them's an entire block. They can't clean up that block at all if there's even the possibility of seeking a TIF. And I think that's another project that's going to need some help in order to get done. It's a brownfield, or it's a contaminated site.
Okay.
And another one is that I own. Also, it's a sixplex that burned. We can't tear it down in case we want to go and request a TIF. But if the 8-year Renaissance zone was approved, we would tear that building down right now and get rid of some of the squatting problems and other things like that are going on in that area of town. So,
Thank you for your comments, and we're getting a little off topic now. We have a question from Commissioner Pepcorn.
I'll try to be real quick. So I think this is a note that we have to change some policies if we are starting to impact with some of our policies that we're having a negative impact from my perspective. So that's my first thing. The second thing is, if this was happened August 1st, why are we talking about it at the end of the year? That's my concern. We try to be current with complying with the state, the new things, and so to me, something didn't go quite correctly if we're talking about it now. I'm disappointed with that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other committee comments, questions? Reed?
Yeah, what is the proposed lease term with this tenant you have lined up?
proposed use.
No, the lease term. The
Lease
length.
terms, it's
Yeah.
it's a 10-year term.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Any other discussion amongst the authority? If none, do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion before us by Commissioner Pepcorn. Any second?
I'll second.
Reed, second. Any further discussion? If none, roll call vote, please.
Madell,
Aye.
Swiatek,
Yes.
Preston,
Aye.
Peterson,
No.
Pipcorn,
Aye.
Matthew,
Aye.
Brashani,
Yes.
Mattern.
Yes. Motion carries. All right, good luck to you, Mr. Patrick. Introduction of the 2024 Renaissance Zone Development Plan update.
So we've
What's
talked
next?
a little bit about this already this morning, but
We did.
as part of being a Renaissance zone and keeping that status, we do have to do regular updates to that plan. So it was, the zone here in Fargo was initially established in 1999. That was for a 15-year timeframe with subsequent updates every 5 years. So this would actually be the third update upcoming that would have happened since initiation. The first update happened in 2014, then again in 2019. A lot of the folks up on the dais were here when that happened. With the recent changes, as we've been talking, one of the changes was an extension of up to 10 years. So right now, or previously, was a 5-year time frame, and this would be up to a 10-year time frame. Just like you saw earlier on the agenda, doesn't mean development plan or development can't change, or the plan can't change within that 10 years. It certainly can. It just means that we would not be required to for 10 years if that is approved. We plan to begin this process in the spring of 2024. There's a few items, such as the things we've been talking about this morning, but other items that we anticipate to either have discussion or updates, including the level of investment. The boundary is always something that we really go in depth with. As you may recall, there is another option to have, with legislative changes, a second satellite block. So we would now be eligible for 2. And then another thing that you've been seeing more recently is unique project composition, where we've had multiple ownership groups within one building. So we plan to work very closely. This is your board. This is your plan for the city of Fargo, and so you'd be involved very heavily. We would be working with the Economic Development Incentives Committee, similarly as we did last time in 2019, the community, property owners, developers, as well as the Downtown Neighborhood Association. So up on the dais, you have a printout of the plan, and so we would be seeking any comments or edits, things like that, that you have now, whether you want to mark that up and give it back to us. If you have any comments either after the meeting or email us or mention, and we will be keeping track of those. So that's just for you to take a peek at and do whatever you want for markups and that type of thing. So there's no action here. It's just an update for you guys.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, question?
Go ahead.
Thank you. With the state legislation modification, didn't it allow another satellite block or 2, or is that not the case? I thought it was 2,
Did.
but I can't remember.
Yep, it did. So there's 2 now, 2 eligible satellite blocks. And so with those, each satellite block can be up to 3 contiguous blocks. So you could have up to six blocks in 2 different portions, 3 and 3 elsewhere.
Perfect. Thank you.
That'll be helpful, I hope. Downtown in focus. Nicole, are you, or is that you?
I'm just going to be very brief, but if there
Okay.
are questions on it, and I'll maybe take them both. These aren't action items; they're more updates for you. So back in 2016, for the downtown plan, we had Interface Studios here. They came back to assess operational processes and confirm goals and kind of give a plan of action for some of those items that maybe hadn't been begun or been accomplished yet. And so there in your packet is a link to that kind of that document. That's really final document. It hasn't been adopted yet by the city commissioner, I should say. Right now it's kind of in between. The city commission saw a presentation from Scott Bishop and I think the planning department will be bringing that back forward to the city commission here shortly. So unless there's any questions on it, it's just for informational purposes. And similar, and thank you to Chairperson Mathern. She, I'm jumping ahead of myself. As a segue, for the growth plan, Chairperson Mathern sits on our advisory committee, and so the city is undergoing a growth plan right now for the whole city, which we've never had before, which is very exciting. Our consultant CZB are kind of jumping from phase 2 into phase 3, so also in your packet is a link to kind of view those documents or view those plans. So if there's any questions on status or anything, or we'd be happy to answer them, or if you'd like more information, we could come back at a future meeting and provide that for you too.
I'd encourage anyone to sit in on those. It is open for people to sit in. It's a very interesting process. I think it's a good group that we're working with. They're bringing out us taking a look at the mentality and the attitude of Fargoans in our area and the conservative pay-as-you-go approach and infill versus the greenfield. And it's really interesting. So nice work. Thank you for that.
I could
Go ahead,
make one comment.
Commissioner.
So back to the downtown in focus plan. You know, I think, and we are still in the process, I believe, in regards to putting a structure in place to oversee the implementation. But it's so terrifically important, it seems to me, to have as part of that conversation the incentives and how they're used to achieve the objectives from that plan. So, you know, what we're doing here is in a little bit of an isolation from the vision, the overall vision for downtown. And that concerns me. And that's why, you know, the long-term view issue, all of that somewhere needs to be brought together. And I don't see it coming together real well yet. So as we go forward with the downtown in focus update, I think it would be important to centralize that somewhere. And I don't know exactly where, but we need to have that conversation that's more of a comprehensive overall view, my opinion.
Good input, so it's all working together. Yes, agree. In our packet, on the very final page, you have a 2024 meeting calendar. So if you want to fill in your calendar on your computer or phone, we've got the dates before us. Let's see how many of those we'll have to utilize. Other business, are there any other questions or comment on any of the other agenda items or any further business to come before this group? If none, we are scheduled for January 24th of 2024. Thank you, everybody, for taking your time throughout the year to meet, and I wish all of you and your families a very Merry Christmas and a wonderful holiday season.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Your time.